Well, we are doing a Q&A today. So the first Thursday of every month is our live Q&A. You might be watching the replay, and that's okay. I am Charmaine Tanner, and I'm excited to be here so we can, for sure, ask or answer specific questions that you have that you've been wondering about. So tell us hi if you are here with us live or watching the replay. Be sure to put any additional questions you have down in the comments, and we will make sure that we will answer those. So I had some previous questions already submitted from parents, so let me start with one of those. And the first question I had from a parent was, this is kind of like when you say, ask me anything. So the first question I had from a parent was, how do I win a trip to Hawaii for the summer? And it was like, well, let's see. Ask me anything. How do you win a trip to Hawaii? I don't know, but let me know if you find out, right? So maybe buy a lottery ticket. But we do have some serious questions from some of our viewers that we're going to get at right now. And so I thought maybe what I could do is share my screen and then we can see the actual questions. So let's see, a Chrome tab. And we'll go to my Visions and Voices Together page. So let me see. We'll bring it up, but like I said, if you have questions, go ahead and type them in. I'm going to have to put my glasses on here. That would probably help me see a lot better. Okay, so we're going to go down to where the previous questions were posted. And one of the first questions that we got was from Sharon. And so let me see if I can pull up her first question. I don't know why it's not showing me all the comments. Okay, well, I'll read it. Yeah, isn't that weird? Okie dokie. I can read you the question. So Sharon's first question was, there was some really informative information that I read on this page about requesting original teacher documentation / notes to review in order to help write meaningful, measurable IEP goals. We requested to have them so we could prepare our input for our daughter's IEP. What is a realistic amount of time to provide this information to us? The case manager said teachers need a week, which will mean we will only have 3 days to review this information and the draft IEP before the meeting. Sharon says, I don't think that that's enough time. We are thinking about rescheduling the meeting so we can fully participate in the IEP process. So, yes, Sharon's been a loyal viewer. So, hey, Sharon. So this is about getting, specific records that you want to be able to look at before you go to the IEP meeting. And another post we had, I think it was like an open-ended question about, things that were important to get before your meeting or something. And I can't remember who it was that posted how important it is to get that raw teacher data that they've collected, other kinds of notes that they've taken about your child's progress. When you make a request like that, one, you want to make sure you do it in writing. 2, technically, they have 45 days time period before they have to give you any, compile these records for you to review. But If you need it for an IEP meeting, there is kind of an exception that you can use. And I'm not an attorney, I can't give you legal advice, but from my understanding as an advocate, you can say that the IDEA regs trump the FERPA regulations. So instead of giving you a full 45 days, in the regs, it talks about how you might need these records before a meeting, before a due process hearing, something like that. And then that 45 days kind of disappears, right? So one, do it in writing. Two, know that, they might respond to you and say, we have 45 days, which obviously isn't going to work for your next meeting. And then the third thing is, if you really want to have time to look at that data and maybe ask questions, that is really helpful to do before the IEP meeting. One, it gives you more time to digest things. Two, it gives you time to have conversations with teachers ahead of time if you need some clarification. So when you walk into the meeting, you know exactly what they're proposing and you've had time to review it. So if you think the time frame is going to be too tight, Sharon, and you'll only get the documentation like 3 days before the meeting, you can request that the meeting be rescheduled. And just look, I don't know how much longer your school is in session, but yeah, just, kind of count out the calendar days, and you can request a certain amount of days, like you want to get these records you're requesting 10 days prior, to the IEP meeting. It could be 10 calendar days, 10 business days. So you would also have to kind of be specific in your request. And Holly asked a great question. She said, does writing count as an email request? And yes, I think for, I don't know, a long time ago, and it's still kind of a question, is like, is this official enough if we email something versus mailing it or having it go certified mail, or what do I need to do? And I've heard Pete Wright, who is a nationally known special ed attorney, say, yes, email counts as a written request. And it's nice because you have, the date and the time that it was sent. So, it gives you a nice document that you can use for a paper trail too. So yeah, email counts. And let me see, because we also had, yes, so here's the one that we had. So Tiffany, let me read yours. It says, my daughter with ASD elopes. I informed the school of this at the IEP meeting back at the beginning of the year. We are new to the district. Nothing was out in her IEP. Then 2 weeks ago, she did it. She had been gone for well over an hour. School was out and she never came to the car. I called the office and I was finally informed that she was missing. She was found about 3 miles away from the school after being gone for almost 2 hours. As far as accommodations, what should I request? Also, no one has been able to tell me protocol when this happens. She'll be in 7th grade. So, Tiffany, thanks for asking that, because that's like a huge issue. I know I have worked with a number of families that have had kids that, will have a tendency to elope. And it is like such a huge safety concern, right? It's like, oh my gosh. So one, I would say that my first recommended step would be request an IEP meeting. If your school is already done for this semester, I don't know. I mean, you could at least talk to the special ed director, have a meeting with the special ed director, because usually they work pretty much through the summer. They might get, like the month of July or something off. But I would request some kind of face-to-face meeting, either with the full IEP team or the special ed director. I also would advise that you tape record the meeting. You let them know as a courtesy at least 24 hours ahead of time. If you live in a two-party state where you need to get their permission, you need to do that like a week or more ahead. Because, they'll need time to consider that. But request a meeting in person, tape record the meeting. If it's agreeable and all those things work out for you. And they need to come up with a safety plan written in the IEP. And so what you need to do is compare what language is in there now. It might be in the behavior plan part of the IEP. It might be under accommodations, but usually a safety plan is a little more detailed than just an accommodation. So I think for elopement and for the protocol, you really aren't looking at just an amendment. You're looking for more language written in the IEP. The important thing is if they say we'll write this safety plan and we'll attach it to the IEP, I say thanks, but no thanks, because attachments have a way of getting lost. If that safety plan isn't actually embedded on the computer when they print it out, it puts you in a position where it's harder for you to hold the school accountable because it's not really written in the IEP if it's only an attachment. So that would be super important. And so, Tiffany, let me see if you are here with us live. Let me know and see if that answered your question. So let's see if we can see. Sharon had this other question, so let me bring this one up. And I'll read this one. The reason I read these is because then I turn this into a podcast, so I need to have the audio. Sharon says, we filed an OSEP complaint in February citing the district's noncompliance in following the IEP by failing to provide curriculum and instructional modifications to general education content area. The state found that the district was non-compliant and ordered a corrective action. Despite the finding itself, the corrective action is a nothing burger. Now we have received a letter from the district's attorney that they filed a motion for reconsideration of the finding of noncompliance and requests that the state's corrective action be vacated. Is this a typical response by a district? What, if anything, can we do about this? So I had messaged Sharon, but we weren't able to connect before the show because, one, I wanted to clarify what state she's in. And here, let me take down this long question. I wanted to verify the state that she's in because that, makes the difference as to, what your state regs say. And then also she had said they filed an OSEP complaint, and I think she meant a state complaint. So I wanted to also clarify that with her. So let me respond this way, that, it's interesting about state complaints. And there's not that specific language in the federal law about state complaints, but there is in the regulations. And again, I'm not an attorney and I can't give you legal advice, but as a parent, as a retired teacher, as an advocate, my understanding is that state complaints is one of those areas that the federal regulations aren't as specific. So instead, this is an area that states can, write their own process as far as, what what's going to happen when, and all those things. So there's some basic requirements from the federal regs, and then the states have leeway to expand on that. So it's important to know what state you live in and to look up those state regs. And it should also be in the procedural safeguard handout or, booklet or whatever that your school offers you at the beginning of each meeting. And then everybody makes a joke about, oh, I could wallpaper my bathroom with these. But every once in a while, you want to take those procedural safeguard handouts, because you got to keep that on hand. Inside there should be the explanation for your state's process for state complaints. So that being said, there's a really good resource, and I'm going to show you the advocacyinstitute.org is a wonderful resource. They have all kinds of basic information and actual cases about state complaints. So let me add this to my desktop. That's a Chrome tab. So if you are thinking of doing a state complaint, this would be the website that I would recommend that you use. Because, like I said, there's even examples in there of, so let me get this up to the broadcast, examples from other states. So you can read how other people, the language that they used in their complaint. That can be really helpful. Of course, you have to change it for your circumstances. So this is from the Advocacy Institute, and one of the things that they have is a Q&A. So I was going to pull this up. It's going to be hard for you to see, but let me show you just what the top looks like. So when you go to advocacyinstitute.org, then you'll click on the IDEA State Complaint Resource Center. And they just have lots of great information. So if you filed a state complaint and the district was found out of compliance, one of the things that they might come back and do, which is what happened in Sharon's case, is the district's attorney said, well, we would like to, see this, looked at again. We don't think this is, a fair decision. We would like a corrective action plan taken off the plate. And Sharons' question is, can they do that? And what can you do to respond as a parent? So if you look here, this is actually one of the specific questions. And it says, may a state complaint decision be appealed? And the short answer is the regulations are silent as to whether a state complaint decision may be appealed. So the federal regulations don't say anything about it. But in the federal regulations, it also doesn't prohibit or require the establishment of procedures to permit either party to request reconsideration of a state complaint decision. And it also goes on to say that you can use mediation and file for due process too if there's, continued to be disputed, issues. And then it goes on to some other details. But so the thing is, Sharon, it depends on your state. My guess is if the school district's attorney is asking for reconsideration, that's allowed in your state. However, it's always good to verify, right? So you can look in your procedural safeguard handout, see what that says about state complaints. You might also have to go to your state Department of Education website and look for your, if it's a special ed manual, the regulations, whatever they call it in your state, and look up state complaints there and see what the process is. So say Heidi hi, Heidi ho. If you're with us live or if you're watching the replay, and we've got time if you've got questions. So put your questions in if you haven't already, and we will pull them up to answer. So let me do Sharon's next question. Let's see. So Sharon asks, if your district agrees to give you an out-of-district placement, what is the district's responsibility to help find a proper placement with you? We asked at the meeting if they had schools to recommend. They said no. We asked if they could please get back to us with some, and they said okay. That was weeks ago, and we still haven't gotten, or they still haven't given us any recommended schools at all. So great. And I think Sharon probably saw our recent show that we did around private schools. So when the show is done, I can come back, and in the post description, I can give you the link for that show that we did recently about private schools. So one, Sharon, you just got to make sure, and other people that are wondering about private schools, you've got to make sure that the school came to that consensus with you at the IEP meeting, that private school was actually checked on the IEP paperwork, that there's in the prior written notice, there's documentation of the discussion. So you need to get all those ducks in a row first, right? So make sure, because if the school really didn't sign the dotted line in the IEP form that they agreed to private school placement, they're going to come back and debate that with you. So one, make sure that that really happened at an IEP meeting. Make sure it's really in writing. The district is responsible, right? It's like the buck stops with the district as far as, making sure that your child is provided the free, appropriate public education. So if they came to an agreement in an IEP meeting that they're going to, pay for tuition and out of district placement. Well, see, and let me look back, because maybe, did you say private? Or did you just say out of district placement? So let me get back here and pull this back up, because those little details make a difference. Okay, she said out of district placement. Okay. So yeah. So she's not talking private. She's just talking out of district placement. And so I guess that would be the other thing, is to make sure, Sharon, the documentation in the IEP is for out of district placement. I'm sorry, I was thinking that you had said private. So make sure all the documentation talks about approval for an out of district placement. However, that doesn't take your district off the hook. They are still responsible for providing your daughter with FAPE. So they, it's not like up to you, right? However, we know if we wait for them to do things, sometimes it will be the week before school starts before we figure this out. So one, you want to document in writing and email them and say, on such and such a date at the IEP meeting, the team was in consensus that there would be an out-of-district placement. We had a conversation about, who's going to, if you can give us recommendations. We haven't received it. Please send us a list of recommended out-of-district placements by, and you give them a date. Like, maybe a week from now, right? If it's been, weeks and you haven't heard. So, but give them a specific date in the email that you want to receive the information. The other thing is, you still want to be scoping things out, right? So connecting with other district or with other parents and a neighboring school district, looking at, like Down syndrome support groups. If they have a Facebook page, ask, what school and and that could be a school that you could check out. I think as much as possible, you want to physically go to the school and observe this out-of-district placement before you agree to it. That's like huge. So again, timing-wise, I don't, know when your school calendar ends for the semester, but so look at actually going and observing. I did find this other website, and I'm not sure if it really is that helpful or not, but let me pull it up. And I think I have, yeah, and that doesn't really apply here because this is for private schools. But if you're interested in a directory where you can put your state, what you're looking for private schools, you can use this link right here, or let me know and I can message you the link so you can have it as a clickable link. But that's for private schools. So with our replay and live people that are here with us today, do you have any questions? I'm going to scroll through here and make sure that I'm not missing any. Oh, okay. So Holly has one. So let's bring up Holly's. She says, why can't you file an OCR and a due process complaint at the same time? Great question. The thing is, I don't know. I think one reason could be that, it could be kind of conflicting, maybe findings, or it's like, why do you want two agencies work, because OCR is from the Office of Civil Rights and due process is through IDEA. And there's some things in the language with IDEA of what you have to exhaust first before you can file for certain things. So Cadre is a great website that gives real specific differences between the different kinds of dispute resolution. So Cadre, it's CADRE, would be a good website for you to check out. But yeah, and the other thing with OCR complaints, from my experience as an advocate, excuse me, is it can take forever to get a decision. And the problem with due process hearings is it can take forever to get a decision if the decision gets appealed, right? So both of those can be, time consuming. Due process costs money, costs like tens of thousands of dollars probably. OCR doesn't cost anything to file an OCR complaint. So you've got that, advantage of an OCR complaint. The problem is that their staff a lot of times are pretty minimal in the different regions for OCR. And that's one of the things that makes it really time consuming. So with OCR, you have to make sure when you submit your complaint that you're specific enough, you have documentation to support what you're saying, because one of the first steps that they'll do at the Office of Civil Rights office is to see if this is even a valid claim and if they are going to bother to investigate. So you've got to get over that first hurdle with an OCR complaint. With a due process complaint, there's still a threshold that you have to meet, because the hearing officer could say, this is frivolous. We're not doing a due process hearing about this. But it's usually easier in a due process hearing to make sure it's really going to go forward. You don't have to usually wait for a hearing officer to say if it's, well-established case and issue that they want to do. So, but yeah, usually there's different things that you have to exhaust first before you can go to another level. And especially when you're mixing agencies and mixing laws, I think it's better to decide what your goal is And, the other thing is with OCR complaints, you really don't have as much input as you would in a due process hearing as to what the resolution is going to be. Hopefully, if you go to due process, you have an attorney, which I always recommend. And your attorney is the one that can argue and make the case for what the resolution is. A lot of times you can file for due process and settle in mediation, or have the attorneys meet and settle before you even go to due process. So there's lots of things that you have to figure out what your goal is, and then choose the right tool to go with it, right? So your goal for OCR is probably going to be different than your goal if you would file for a due process hearing. So yeah, just lots of things that you have to consider. So I don't think at the beginning I even introduced myself. So if you are new to the show, I'm Charmaine Tanner, and I do this weekly Facebook Live show. And the first Thursday of each month is our Q&A time. So you can post questions in our Facebook group here, or you can be on with us and give me your questions. So Holly, let me know if that answered your question about OCR and due process complaints and why you can't do them at the same time. All righty. Well, I don't see any other questions here. Please know that if you found this valuable and there are some nuggets in here that you would like to also offer to your friends, that you let them know about the video. As I mentioned before, we're here every Thursday, and my passion is to help you become an even more effective advocate for your child. As a parent, I know what it's like to have to speak up for your kid. And as a retired teacher, I know for so many parents, navigating the special ed system is just kind of a nightmare. So my whole goal when I started my advocacy business years ago was that I would take my knowledge from education and being a special ed teacher and a classroom teacher, and bring that knowledge I gained as a parent and what I've learned from so many self-advocates and other parents, and blend them together to make this collaborative special education advocacy concept, where we can make sure that your child is happy, that they're safe, and learning every day with their friends at school. So enjoy your next few days, and we shall see you again next Thursday at noon Mountain Time. I'm Charmaine Tanner, and take care. Oh yes, our trip to Hawaii.